Welcome. I'm Dr. Catherine Y. Brown, and today I am so excited to introduce you to Dr. Gilles Lamarche. He is a content expert and is doing amazing things. So, Dr. Lamarche, welcome, and I'm so excited to have you here.
Well, Dr. Brown, it's a pleasure to be with you, and I have no idea how you found me or how your assistant found me, but I'm always happy to share my knowledge and my experience, and especially as it relates to primary pulmonary hypertension. So yeah, happy to be with you and to share some insights with your audience today.
Thank you so much. So we started the work with the, at which we talked about the Roberta Baines Wheeler, or RBW, Pulmonary Hypertension Awareness Group, in honor of my late mother. And so this is part of our journey of listening to the stories of patients, caregivers, medical professionals, and the community. So before we go into your PH story, I would like you to tell me about who you are, where you're located, and all of the things that you are doing professionally. And then we'll go to the PH journey.
So I am currently living in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm the Vice President of University Advancement and Enrollment at a beautiful private university called Life University. I lived most of my life in Canada. I did not move to the United States until 2006. So if I look at my professional journey, I went to undergrad at the University of Toronto. I then went on to chiropractic college, also in Toronto, graduated in 1979, and I became a practicing chiropractor. And in the spring of 2003, I became gravely ill, and the primary diagnosis was primary pulmonary hypertension. My tension was measured at 57 millimeters mercury of pressure. As you probably know, the normal is 15, which means that the pressure from my lungs to the right side of my heart was 4 times greater than should be. And that caused my body to adapt to that change. And probably for years, to the point where when I got diagnosed, I also had cardiomegaly measured at 2.5, which means my heart was literally, you know, we say our heart should be about the size of our fist. It was this fist, plus another one. My heart had grown so big that there was just no more room for it to grow in my chest. And that's really when my symptoms started. And my symptoms didn't start like all of a sudden, you know, it didn't start over time. Like literally, like all of a sudden one day I was like, man, I have so much trouble breathing. And I'm allergic to animal hair. And if there's a cat, for example, or if I'm around a horse, the sensation I was getting back in the spring of 2003 was very similar to that. There was this deep wheeze, the deep pressure in my chest. And I knew there was no animal around me. So my thought was, well, you know, I must be allergic to something else. I just got to figure out what it is. And I had one of my assistants at a very busy chiropractic practice. And I had one of my assistants come to me one day, maybe a few weeks or a month or so into that. She says to me, you know, she puts her hands on my shoulders and she's tearing up. She says, I'm so afraid you're going to die in front of me. I was like, whoa, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? You're a tough guy, right? What are you talking about? Yeah. She said, listen to yourself breathing. You sound terrible. And she said, I don't want to be disrespectful, doc, but you look terrible. Like you have aged 10 years in the past 6 months. There must be something seriously wrong with you. Well, of course, as a typical male trying to justify my position, I said, no, I'm okay. I'm trying to figure out what I'm allergic to. Well, obviously she was much smarter than me, like most women are smarter than men. I say that all the time. You know, I have a daughter and a wife and I have 3 granddaughters, so I come by it pretty honestly. And I said, so anyway, she called a friend of mine, my best friend, who's a medical doctor. And this was on a Monday. So he called me that night and he said, if I made a promise to someone, you were the only person in the world who could help me fulfill my promise. Would you do whatever it takes to help me fulfill my promise? I said, of course I would. That's what friends do. He said, great. I'll see you tomorrow in my office at 4 o'clock. And he literally hung up the phone because he knew the way I think. And he knew that I just wouldn't show up at his office unless he figured out a way to get me there. So I ended up going to his office because he knew I didn't see patients on Tuesday afternoon. So went to his office, and of course, this is a very long story. We'll make it really short.
No, keep going. This is good.
Well, I mean, through testing by him first as the PCP, then onto a cardiologist local, and more testing, and then onto a regional cardiologist, a pulmonologist, and every ologist you can think of, all the way up to like the grand poobah of cardiology in Canada. They all told me the exact same thing. You have primary pulmonary hypertension. Unless you agree to a double lung and heart transplant, you will be dead in 24 months or less.
Mhm.
I was 48 years old. I was a pretty fit guy. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, this makes no sense. And of course, I read up, I learned more about primary pulmonary hypertension. Yeah, I knew a little bit about it, but I'm not a cardiologist, so I didn't really have all the understanding. I read more about it. I also looked at double-lung and heart transplant recipients. What kind of life do they get to live? It was not really pretty to read all that, and it's already, I'm talking about 2003, so 19 years ago. So I prayed a lot about it. I meditated about it. And I finally said to my buddy, I was like, I'm not doing this. I am not getting a transplant. I will die before I go through the transplant.
Mm.
And the love that we have for each other and the love that our children have for us, my kids still call him Uncle Barry. And my kids are 37, 39, and 40 years old. And his
Mhm.
children are in their 30s. They call me Uncle Gilles. It's that kind of family love that we have for each other. He was like, I am not going to let you die on my niece and nephews. I was like, Barry, I've looked at all this. This makes no sense. I've had a beautiful life. I've been blessed with a great life. If this is God's plan for my life, I'm okay. And I didn't go through any of the phases that people usually go through when they're diagnosed with something that's terminal. I didn't have anger. I didn't have denial.
Mhm.
I mean, I knew I was in trouble because I could barely breathe. And so for many months, until I found somebody to take over my practice, because my practice was part of my family, 25-year practice, these people, you love them. I mean, every day I get to hang out with like awesome, amazing people that I get to help. And so until I found someone to take over my practice, I succumbed to the half-hourly use of Ventolin. He tried me on 4 or 5 different inhalers. Ventolin appeared to be the one that worked the best.
Yeah.
But, they tell you to take it 2 or 3 times a day. While I was seeing patients, I was taking it every 30 minutes.
Oh my goodness.
It was an awful feeling, but it allowed me to breathe, to take care, because I tell people I was taking care of my babies. I mean, it didn't matter the age of the patients. I love my patients. So finally, I found somebody to take over my practice. And on the 14th of April in 2004, I retired from practice.
Mhm.
And I did everything that people do when they know they're going to die. I did all my preparations to make it easy on my family. I mean, I did everything. I even told my children, like, I put $10,000 aside in this account. This is for a party. Don't cry because I'm gone. Party and be grateful because I came.
Yeah.
And we had a good time. We did good things together. We served humanity. We built a beautiful family. We did all these great things. So, yeah, that'll be gone, but you'll be okay. And that's what I worked on. That was the most important thing for me. And I rested. Obviously, I slept a lot. I was tired. If I didn't put Ventolin in my body, I mean, I couldn't go up a flight of stairs by myself. I had trouble getting from my driveway into my house from my car. I mean, I was going downhill, and I was going downhill fast. And on the 15th of May, 31 days later, I woke up. And this is where the story is going to be different than maybe what you've heard from other individuals who suffered primary pulmonary hypertension. I thought, you're an idiot. You've been preaching this chiropractic paradigm of health and healing for 25 years. There must be something seriously wrong with your spine and nervous system. Because a lot of people listening in may not understand what chiropractors do. You think, well, a chiropractor is good for your neck, it's good for your back. Well, we're not bone doctors. We're actually neurological doctors. We pay attention to how your nervous system works, how your brain communicates with the rest of your body, how the body communicates with the rest of the brain. We just get to access that through the spine. And probably don't have time to explain all of that today, but when my brain went there and I was like, well, how could there be? I get checked by a chiropractor every couple of weeks because it was just the right thing for me to do. And then I realized that for probably 30 years, it had never been the same chiropractor. It was just buddies. I'd go have lunch with a buddy, say, oh, you want to go to your office? You want to come to my office? I'll check you and you check me. Never thorough care, never examinations. I hadn't had an x-ray in my spine in probably 25 years. Hadn't had, a full examination of my neurological function, probably at least that long. And all this noise went on in my head. And when it finally all got silent, I was like, oh my gosh, maybe my life isn't over.
Mm-hmm.
So I reached over and I called my former office manager, who had been an employee, but also a friend since high school. So we knew each other really, really well. And I said to her, Jenna, I want to make an appointment as a new patient. And she started to laugh. She was like, you've been a chiropractic patient like since you're a kid. I said, where am I a practice member? And all of a sudden it just got totally silent. She was like, oh my gosh, nowhere. I said, exactly. I said, you and our team get better care than I've been receiving all these years.
Yeah.
So I made an appointment, went in, had a thorough consultation, exam, x-rays, you name it. They tested everything. And what I discovered is that my spine looked pretty good, except it was not a very medical term, but it was a complete mess from C7 to T4.
Okay.
And it just so happens that the neurological structures that give the power to the heart and lungs, right? Because your nervous system is an electrical system. So the neurological structures that give power to heart and lungs exit the spine from T1 to T4. And I believe that the problem in my spine, because I had no musculoskeletal symptoms whatsoever. So I did not have pain in my neck. I did not have pain in my back, but I was dying.
Yeah.
So here were these two young chiropractors that had bought my practice, looking at this and go like, we don't really know how to manage something like this. I said, well, fortunate enough, you have a mentor that can teach you how to manage like that. Happens to be me.
Oh, I love this.
And I can teach you how I would manage that if that was you on the x-ray right there. So I basically shared with them, my 25 years of experience and what I would do with this person. And so they agreed to take me under care. And I started getting care, and I was in the chiropractor's office every day, 5 days a week, until the end of August. So some people say, oh my gosh, that's a lot of, you went for a lot of visits, like 60 plus visits, 5 days a week for like 12 weeks.
Wow.
I said, well, compared to what?
Mm-hmm.
5 times a week compared to what?
Yeah.
Compared to being dead. So I was willing to do whatever it took, because even then when I said, well, I would see that person every single day. And I remember the young lady said to me, the young chiropractor lady, she said, well, for how long? I said, well, it's me you're talking about. Until I die, until I thrive, I don't have a lot of other options, because I had no other options. I'd run out of options. So by the end of August, my next cardiology appointment in Toronto, and we discovered that my pulmonary pressure had dropped from 57 to 27. 90 days, a 50% improvement in my pulmonary pressure. Okay. By the end, and then my care frequency started decreasing, because now I could walk, I could go up a flight of stairs. Symptomatically, you could tell I was getting well, but from a functional perspective, my spine still wasn't exactly the way it needed to be. So I continued care 3 times a week for a while, twice a week for a while. So I would tell you, I probably went into the chiropractor's office during that first year, probably somewhere between 100 and 120, 130 times.
Mm-hmm.
I got checked and I got adjusted every single time. It literally did some work on my spine every single time. By the end of that first year, my pulmonary pressure was normal at 15. Now, what appears in people's minds, even more miraculous, is that within 2 years, I no longer had cardiomegaly. So my heart went from being 2.5 times its normal size back down to normal size within 2 years. People say, well, how does that happen? What's important to understand, and we know that to be true scientifically, and you as a professor, I'm sure you know that, is that the body has an ability to adapt.
Mm-hmm.
It adapts to a negative stress. It adapts to a positive stress. When the stress is gone, it also adapts. So if you and I decided, Dr. Brown, that every day or every second day, you and I would meet up as friends and we would go to the gym because we were focusing on building big biceps. We might start with 10 or 15 pound weights. A week or 2 or 3 later, we'd be at 20 and then 25. And maybe within a few months, we might be doing, barbell curls with 50 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what would happen to the muscle? It would build up, because as you strained it more, it would build up, it would build up, it would build up. And then all of a sudden you'd say, Gilles, I've had enough of this. I don't want to come to the gym anymore. And we would stop going to the gym.
Yeah.
Within 3 to 6 months, within a year, those nice big biceps that we'd built up, they'd all be back down to the normal they were before we ever worked out, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
Well, the heart is a muscle. It's exactly what it did. And so for the last few months, I've been well all that time, by the way.
That's what I was going to ask you, Dr. Gilles. It's like, help me understand, were you on medication? Did they prescribe you anything during this time? Because you've not mentioned anything about medicine.
Nothing. I said to my friend, I was not going through the surgery. They had no options for me whatsoever. So all I did was I was taking Ventolin to allow me to breathe. And then I was like, I'm done. Because I wasn't willing to go through a double organ heart transplant recipient procedure. That wasn't something I wanted to do, because I looked at the quality of life. And I've had a great life. I mean, I'm the type of guy who, drives fast cars, motorcycles, snowmobiles, jumps out of planes. I've had a great life. There is nothing that I want to do that I have not had an opportunity to do. But there's one thing I'm working on right now. So until November of this year, we're now what, June rather of 2022. Until November of 2021, I would tell you I'd pretty much accomplished everything I wanted to do. There was nothing on my bucket list that I really want to do this. Until I was running a 5K race, and at the end of 5K race, a lady that is part of the US Track and Field Association came to me asking me if they could potentially host a meet on our track here at Life University in Georgia. And we had a nice long conversation, and she's a runner, and she's, runs a lot. And as she said, what did you run in high school and college? I said, I was a 400-meter runner. She said, did you ever think of joining the US Track and Field Association and maybe participating in masters meets? I was like, you know what? I'd never really thought about it. I said, but I'm not competitive anymore. And she looks at me with a big smile. She was like, really? I said, no, I'm not competitive anymore. I've been there, done that. I don't need to compete. So she says to me, tell me that you weren't trying to pass the 4 people ahead of you when you were nearing the finish line of this 5K. And I looked at her, I was like, oh my gosh, I was. I can't deny it, I was. She said, so Gilles, you're still competitive.
Yeah.
Think about what that would look like for you. I thought, I'll think about it. Sounds pretty cool. So in November, I spoke with our track coach here at Life University. And he says, you're not going to be fast enough now to train with our kids because, they're all in their 20s.
Yeah.
He said, but I can give you a program of how you can get yourself up to the point where you can get to the track, but don't try to get on the track before you get into the gym. So I got into the gym. I started working out at the gym 3 days a week, November, December, January, February, March, April. I started going onto the track just a day a week. I then hired a professional track coach who's a 400-meter former Olympian who actually lives from Jamaica, who lives in Atlanta. He coaches Akila Jones, many of the famous current athletes. And he had watched me train one day on the track, and I had no idea who this guy was. It was on a Sunday. He was there with an athlete. I was there by myself. He just saw me, walking around the track, doing my warm-ups, picking up plastic water bottles that, the kids hadn't put in the trash. And when I got it, I cleaned it all up, and then I did my training. When I was done my training, he said, I'm coming to introduce myself to you because you look like you might be somebody important at Life University. I was like, well, I don't know if I'm important, but I am the vice president at Life University, So we had this great conversation to find out that he's a 400-meter track coach. That's what he does for a living. So he said, what are you training for? I said, I don't know, someday I might like to run a 400-meter at Masters event. And he says to me, you've got really, really good technique. I can train you up. He said, I could train you up, and I bet you I could get you ready to run the 2023 World Championships. And I was like, what? Right? I have not trained for a 400 since I was in first year of college in 1972, 73.
Right.
So I have been training with him, and it's amazing. It's amazing what the body can do when you have a planned training. Like, I am fitter now. I've only been working with him for like 2 months. I am fitter now than I've been for like the last 35 years, probably. Like in 2 months of working. And I started really, really slow.
Yeah.
And not going crazy, but he's got me to the point where I'm picking up speed. He's got me to the point where I'm not running 400s yet, but he's got me running some 100s and some 200s. And I will tell you, Dr. Brown, I have been completely well since 2005.
Okay.
If I went to a medical doctor today for a general physical exam, which I did a few years ago, the doctor said, what do you mean you don't take any medications? I said, never have. And I still don't. And so, she took my blood pressure. She was like, oh my gosh, 110/70? I said, yeah, that's pretty much my normal. She took my resting pulse. It was 54. So that's low. I said, no, it's not. My resting pulse used to be 48 when I ran a lot. So 54 is like totally normal for me. She was like, I never get to see people like you.
Yeah.
Those were her words. I never get to see people like you. I said, well, you see one now. And so I think if I went back now with the training that I've been doing, it would be like, wow, how is this even possible? So the message I like to share with people is how amazing the human body is, how you were made to be self-developing, self-maintaining, self-healing, provided there's no interference.
That's right.
So interference comes from where? Well, let's think of, forget the human body, let's think of our water system, for example, right? The water system, the water table is meant to be self-cleansing, provided there's no interference. Where does the major interference come from as it relates to our water table?
Yeah.
Pollution, right? Pollution. Or unfortunately, a lot of people taking all sorts of drugs, hormones, etc., birth control, which then goes through their body via the urine into the toilet, into the water table.
Yeah.
We have a major problem with that system. It is not healing itself the way it was designed by God to heal. But this system, that's a choice we get to make. So I get to make the choice, like everybody listening gets to make the choice. What are you putting into your mind? What are you putting into your body? What are you drinking? What are you eating?
Mm-hmm.
And I look at all of that. And then now, more than ever, I get checked by a chiropractor every single week, the same chiropractor. I really never have a problem. The odd time, if I've been working out harder, or if I'm lifting or doing yard work or something, I need an adjustment, I get the adjustment, but I've been completely well ever since. And interestingly enough, I've had a number of people, well, not dozens, but I've had probably 5 or 6 people reach out to me. One of them came from a former colleague in my little town of Timmins, Ontario, which is way up in northern Canada. A medical doctor that I was friends with that we would cross-refer patients to while I was in practice. He called me, he said, "You had primary pulmonary hypertension. That was your diagnosis." I said, "Yeah." He said, "And now you're all well. What did you do?" So I told him. He said, "Would you be willing to call one of my patients?" Because I got like a 52-year-old guy who's got pulmonary hypertension, and the cardiologist is saying the same thing they told you. So I called the gentleman. I was already living in the US by then, but I called the gentleman, had a great conversation with him. I referred him to someone. He got well. I had a gentleman in his 70s who lives in Florida reached out to me. And again, how he got my cell phone number, I have no idea. But I guess in today's world, people can find you. So I got on the phone with him, and he told me where he lived. And I suggested a chiropractor friend that I knew in Florida. I sent him to her, and she took care of him. And she called me. She said, "Gilles, he's got a very similar problem to how you explained what you had going on in your spine." And he called me a few months after he started care with her. And he said, "I'm not going to tell you I'm well, but let me tell you what I did today." He said, "I went grocery shopping with my wife for the first time in a number of years. I was not in a wheelchair. I did not have an oxygen tank. And I actually pushed the cart for my wife." He said, "Am I ever going to be completely well like you are? I don't know. But let me tell you, my quality of life is so much better than it was for the past 10 or 15 years. So I've had those stories, and
Those stories. So let me ask you this then. Is this something that you are doing research and advocating for people to look at, the science of chiropractic medicine as a treatment option? Or how does that work? Because you've had success and you share that other people have, but have you shared this from a scientific lens? So it's something that can be considered.
So I should get slapped for this one, but I attempted to. So prior to coming to Marietta, I was in Dallas, Texas for 6 years. And I went to the Cooper Institute to get one of those executive physicals and had a great, great experience with them. And the first interaction was with the PCP.
Mm-hmm.
And I shared with him that I used to have primary. And he said, "You didn't have primary. You said you can't used to have. You have it, you have it." I said, "No, doc, I used to have it. I no longer have it." And I had this conversation with him. He said, "Any chance you can get me your file?" Well, that's before electronic file transfer. My file was like this thick. But I called my buddy, and I didn't talk to him. I talked to his assistant. I said, "Any chance?" I said, "I know my file's really, really big. Would you be willing to fax it?" And I said, "And tell Barry, if it's a $25 bill, I'll pay him next time I see him. But would you be willing to fax it to this doctor in Dallas?" She said, "Yeah, I'll do it right now. I'll just take your whole file out and I'll just put it on the fax machine and we'll get it going." So she faxed it to him. And of course, by the time he got it, I was already out of his office on to the next doctor I was going to see for all these tests they were doing. But the final doctor I was seeing was the cardiologist. Her name I will remember forever. If you ask me the name of my primary cardiologist, I have no idea who he is. Can't remember his name because I can talk about that later, but it's just because he was not genuine and authentic and he wasn't able to listen. Anyway, Dr. Nina Radford was her name. So that's back, I think, in 2007, 2008 timeline. So by the time I got to her as the last doctor I was seeing in this 7 or 8 hour stretch of being examined, full examination, she looked at me when I walked in there and she had my file beside her. She was like, "There is no way that person is you." I said, "Yes, that person is me." So we had a short conversation. She said, "Well, this is what I was prepared to do because our typical protocol would be we're going to do a stress test at the end of that. I'm not really comfortable doing a stress test when I look at this file."
Mm-hmm.
She said, "However, if you would consent to it, and there was an extra fee, it was like $2,300 extra. She would have a crash cart there. She'd have a couple of physicians there just in case. They would do an echocardiogram before my stress test, run the stress test, do an echocardiogram after the stress test, and look at all this information. And she said, would you be willing to do that for the extra, whatever it was, $2,300, I think it was. I said, yeah, sure, no problem. Let's do that. She said, okay. So they came in, did a stress test, had a crash cart with them, and they put me on the treadmill. I scored top 95th percentile of males over 35. Okay. It was 2007, which means I was 52.
Mm-hmm.
How does that happen? It happens when your body functions the way it's designed to function. So Dr. Radford said to me, could I submit this information to a friend of mine who is the head of the primary pulmonary hypertension department at Southwestern Medical Center in Dallas? I said, absolutely. Anything you want, I will. Anyway, this lady, not Dr. Radford, but this other lady who was just a fine, kind, brilliant doctor, communicates with me, gives me her private cell phone number, her private email address. She was like, this is what I think we should do. This is exciting. So Dr. Radford was excited. This other doctor was super excited. I could not get the director of research or the president of the institution where I was to actually agree to do what they wanted to do. Because I was an N of one, right? I was the only one they knew that had gotten well with chiropractic care from primary pulmonary hypertension, and they had no funding. But the doctor at Southwestern Medical said to me, we will send our primary pulmonary hypertension patients to your clinic, to this institution where I was at. We'll send them to the clinic. And if they show subjective improvement, not objective improvement, if they show subjective improvement in a timeline that you deem to be appropriate as a chiropractor, and you see enough of it, and we document that, I will write a grant proposal to fund a study so we can attempt to capture objective evidence. And the institution wasn't willing to do it.
Wow.
And I let it go. And I was like, well, I'm a person. I'm not going to fund a $2 or $5 million project. How am I ever going to get that done? So that's why when I got the invitation from your assist, I said to myself, heck yeah. I mean, if this helps one person, Dr. Brown,
yes.
I mean, I think it's awesome. If it helps more people. So if I was going to give anybody advice, nobody's asked me for advice, but you said if I have advice.
Yes, that was my last question, right? Is that when we think of awareness, empowerment, and hope, because that's our mantra, what is the advice? What would you share?
So chances are that everyone has hope. And if you have never been checked by a chiropractor to make sure that your spine and nervous system are functioning at their optimum, then do that.
Mm-hmm.
Do that. I'm not going to promise you're going to get well like I did, but I didn't have any other intervention other than getting my spine corrected. So if you do go to a chiropractor and you don't have a problem in that area of your spine, chances are they won't be able to help you. But all I'm asking you to do for yourself and for your family, go and get a thorough consultation and examination, because you never know. Like the six people that I've sent to a chiropractor after they communicated with me about this have all gotten well. The oldest was in his early 70s. Like I said, I didn't hear about him, years later. We just stayed in communication for a few months. But he said, but Dr. Lamarche said, my quality of life is so much better. And if this is all it did for me, then I'm totally happy. Had another young guy who was in his 30s, and I remember his name because his name was Danny Thomas. And because of the former actor, which you might be too young to remember. Danny
No, I know
Thomas.
who you're talking about.
That's how I remember this young guy's name. But he was 30 or 31 years old, married with 2 children, and had been given the same fate. And he ended up living in a state and city where one of my great friends practices, and I sent him to my buddy, and he has gotten completely well. So there's no guarantees in healthcare, as we all know. We wish we could guarantee that we could help anyone, but to have an examination by a chiropractor. Now, I'm going to warn you, your cardiologist may not be happy about that, because my cardiologist was so upset about that.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, why wouldn't you be thrilled that I'm getting well? Because you're supposed to be getting worse. So it can't be chiropractic. I mean, he denied every possibility. And I was like, okay, dude, we're done, which is why I don't even remember his name. He was a super nice guy until then. Until I got well, he was super nice. As I started getting well, he was like, it's not chiropractic. We made a mistake in our diagnosis. I was like, doc, there's been like 4 or 5 cardiologists look at me. You guys have all told me the same thing. The measurements on the scans have all been the same. On the ultrasounds have all been the same.
Yeah.
And they're all getting worse. And now I'm getting better. And you think you made a mistake in your diagnosis? Could I interest you in looking at different options of maybe something you've never studied before? Because you've never seen life that way. You've never seen medicine that way. You've never seen the body that way. I said, because at the end of the day, I can talk to any orthopedic surgeon, and the orthopedic surgeon will tell me that it's the body that heals the body. You know, my daughter fractured her femur skiing when she was 7 or 8 years old. And I remember taking her to emerge. I remember the orthopedic surgeon coming in, looking at the x-rays with him and saying, you know, we got to do this. We're going to set it, you know. And then once he had her casted, he looked at her, he said, honey, all you need to do now, go home and rest and let your body do the healing. Because your body is smart and your body will heal. We just put the bone straight now. That's all you need to do. The cardiologist I had did not even want to think that way. He was about intervention, trying to convince me I needed a double lung and heart transplant. And when I started getting well, he pretty much discounted me altogether, which is why I discounted him. I was like, I don't need a person like that in my life. I want people that are upbeat, personal, and willing to look at options, because there are options. And for anybody listening in, who's religious, Christian, or any other, you've got to believe that God made you perfect. Right? I believe that God made us perfect. God made us to be self-developing, self-maintaining, self-healing. When the sperm cell hit the egg cell, nobody told it what to do. There was a spark that happened every single time, and cells divide and create these beautiful human beings. We were designed to be self-developing, self-maintaining, self-healing. Again, provided there's no interference. So those listening in, whether it's for yourself or for a loved one, would it not be valuable to find out whether or not there's interference between the communication from your brain to the rest of your body? Would it not make sense to make sure that there's no interference in that communication? Because after all, I think we all know that the brain controls everything. It's your master computer. It sends all its messages and receives all the messages from the rest of the body through the spinal cord. So brain, brainstem, spinal cord, between every vertebrae from the first one in your neck, we call C1, to the last one in your lumbar region called L5, there are nerve roots that exit, and then beyond that through the sacrum, but there are nerve roots that exit, and those nerve roots actually bring the electrical power to make your body work. So just like having a dimmer switch in your dining room to dim the lights, if I walked into your dining room and it was way too bright, and I was like, oh, can you dim the lights? Just coming from outside or whatever, you would turn it down. And if somebody walked in and said, oh, it's so dark here, can you give me more light? You wouldn't think of changing the light bulbs, would you? You would go to the switch and you would give the light bulbs more power. So the goal is not to change the light bulb, because the problem's not with the light bulb. The problem is with the amount of power. So I use that analogy for me, because the problem wasn't that I needed new lungs and a new heart. The problem is that my lungs and heart needed the amount of power that is required for them to function at their optimum. That's what's required. So I urge everybody listening in, if you've been diagnosed with any condition, PPH or others, get checked. You have nothing to lose. Go get checked by a great chiropractor to determine whether or not there's interference happening in your spine. And if there is, get it corrected.
Well, there you have it.
See the possibilities.
Well, thank you for sharing your PH story. I am glad to hear that you are well. You have added a goal to your bucket list,
Big one.
and that your medical team has given you the green light, and that is beautiful. That's not the story for everyone.
No, it's not.
And so it's one story, and so I'm excited to have you share it. And then you retired from one practice, and now you're a vice president. So you certainly are not resting.
I'm not resting much.
That. You are not.
No, we have about 2,700 students here, so it is busy all the time. My wife says, like, you work more hours now than when you were in practice.
You did before. I love it. Is there any closing thought that you want to share that you haven't already shared as we get ready to end today?
I think my closing thoughts was there's always hope.
Okay.
And if you have not been examined by a chiropractor, you have not attempted everything that's possible.
Well,
Right? You
thank
have not looked at all possible avenues. That is an avenue that most people listening in probably have never considered, because you think of chiropractic for neck pain or back pain.
yeah.
Look at the options, and you have not you have not eliminated all roadways until you've at least been checked by a chiropractor.
Well, there you have it. Now, I'm telling you, we got to get you to be an advocate for PH as well, because you are definitely an advocate for chiropractic medicine. And I do appreciate you. For all of our viewers, you have met Dr. Lamarche, who has shared his story. Now, we have to have you come back at some point, because I want to know how you did on the race, or email me a photo, because I want to see it, because I know you're crossing that finish line and you are going to cross it strong. So if I can't get him back on because of his busy schedule, I will hopefully be.
I will always make myself available. I told my assistant, if they need me again, because I believe that God put this burden in my life to create opportunities for other people.
Amazing.
But it also created an opportunity for me, because the burden was alleviated and it opened me up to be able to help a lot more people.
A lot more people.
And I was opening my phone quickly to see if I could find a picture, but because this is something that my son-in-law did for me as a joke, which I might have to. Hang on a second here.
Yeah, you have to move your virtual.
Yeah, sorry about that. I'm sitting in my office here, but.
All right, let's see.
So my son-in-law, I found this picture on the net, and I asked him to put my head on the window. So that has become part of my motivation, but I will tell you that my biggest motivation is that will be the 20th anniversary of my terminal diagnosis.
Oh my goodness. I want to put, what is the date again of this race?
It's in August of 2023.
Okay.
It's in Budapest, Hungary. So
right.
It is what wakes me up. Like when I wake up and I know it's time to get to the track, time to go to the gym, I have had not one day that I say, I can't do this. Every day I wake up, I was like, think about the people you could potentially impact
if you do
by getting this done. It's not about winning. It's not about getting a medal. It's about getting on the track, making it to the championships. And my coach says he thinks I'm good enough that, of course, I'm going to be running against people my own age group. Right? I'm not going to be running against the 35-year-olds.
That's right.
They would beat me big time. But I'll be 68 by then.
Oh,
and God only knows what's possible. But right now, things are looking good.
I love it. And on that note, that's the perfect sentence. Things are looking good. Thank you all for joining us and tuning in and listening. I look forward to sharing the next episode with you. And again, I'm Dr. Catherine Y. Brown, and I will see you all next time. You are amazing. Thank you.